Yeah. Good morning and welcome to Living My Promise Masterclass. Today we have with us Anshu Bhartiya. She's the CEO at Unlimited India. Living My Promise, let me talk a little bit about Living My Promise. Living My Promise is an initiative for ordinary Indians with a net worth of above 1 crore where they sign up to give back and pledge 50% of their net worth for philanthropic causes. People can choose to give to any causes that they like, either in their lifetime or in their wills. So far, 41 individuals have signed up to this initiative. You can check about them on livingmypromise.org website. Thank you and welcome, Anshu.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Sushank.
Yeah. So, quickly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. First of all, I just want to say A, thank you for this forum, and B is this whole living a promise is a very exciting concept. I'm actually very keen on seeing how this evolves. It's a very big step into also, I think, bringing in social consciousness in people. So with that, I'm Anshu Bhartiya. I'm the CEO of Unlimited India. Have done 17 years of corporate experience and then moved into the development sector. And of course, most of you on the phone or people who've been in the sector or looking at doing a crossover, I think it's intensely gratifying. The people you meet, the new ideas you see, the passion and energy is transformational. I think there is hope for a lot of good work to be done and good work being done.
Yeah.
So very happy to be here.
Thank you. So I have the first question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Only a handful of social enterprises in India have been able to scale to an impact on 1 million plus lives.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we seeing more such enterprises emerge? What has been the barrier to their growth?
So let's just, I just want to take a step back, right? What is scale?
Yeah.
We keep having these questions in conferences, in closed door meetings, what is scale? Still struggling with that answer. Is it being in one district, in one ward, being in a state, being in the country, going global? What is scale? Then let's look at how many Indian enterprises have gone to scale.
Mm-hmm.
We've been around forever. How many names come to mind which you would call as scale, right? I was trying to do this and I just could get a few handful of names. Then let's look at social enterprises. Now for Unlimited India, we call anybody who's taking a risk, running an organization with social impact, a social entrepreneur, which means that we work with for-profits and not-for-profits. But let's stick to social enterprises as the world knows them, which are the for-profit making social enterprises. Like you said, only a handful have gone scale, right? Now, which other handful? Amul will come to mind, Fab India will come to mind, Arvind Eye Care will come to mind, right? But I just want to say, let's look at what made them go to scale. It was, Amul got fantabulous grants from the government of India. There was a government machinery which allowed Amul to go to scale, right? Fab India, while that was the front, a lot of grants went into the background for all the NGOs working on livelihoods to enable that supply to Fab India. Right? Where is that kind of capital today? Which social enterprise can demand or ask for capital which will enable a social enterprise to scale? Right? So, coming to that, what are the barriers? In spite of all these, I think there's still, Arvind Eye Care is a newer name. There's ERC Eye Care working in Assam. They've just expanded in Assam, they might expand to another state, working in the most difficult terrain. What we call it as a social enterprise which has gone to scale. Greenway Grameen, they make stoves, much known. They go into rural India and sell stoves. They've sold 900 stoves till date. They have raised about 10 crores in capital. Their annual turnover is 30 crores. Now, is that scale? I don't know. To me, an organization working with the back of the beyond, being able to get outreach there, to service the market, find a model which works, raise money, show returns, be profitable, maybe not in cash, but at least profitable, far better than a lot of the enterprises we know today. Isn't that scale? So I would just say there are people scaling. It's just we need to be more mindful of what scale means. And going to your question on what are the impediments, where is that grant capital? So a social enterprise which is looking at triple bottom line needs grant to come in. Can we get grant at the right time? Can we get appropriate capital, riskier capital at the scale stage? So while you call yourself social enterprise or we call ourselves social enterprises, initially you might get grant. But when you're scaling up, you need risky capital which will be patient. at that time it becomes an impediment. So, I would just say money, of course, and second is resources. The biggest barrier to scale is how do I find people to join me? Given a choice between Flipkart, a startup Flipkart, or a startup Greenway Grameen, which one would I join? Right? My ESOPs are not going to be too much of value even on paper at Greenway Grameen versus a Flipkart, at least notionally at the time I joined, right? But you need the same kind of people, in fact, even sturdier people, because you're going to go sell to rural India. When you're selling a product like stoves, eventually village men will only allow a woman to come and sell. So how many women will go and sell stoves in the rural India? So I think ability to get access to capital, relevant co-founders where I'm an alone startup founder, and patient money, I think are the three bigger impediments to social enterprises. Okay. And then lay over all the other contexts of enterprises. Ease of doing business, ease of attracting foreign money, ease of being able to do things, those would be which is true for everyone.
Yeah. For viewers who are watching this session, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Anshu Bhatia, please leave in the comment section and I will be taking those up with Anshu Bhatia. Thank you, Anshu, that was a very nice answer for you. We have another question. There are already millions of NGOs out there. Why do we need to incubate more of them, especially if we can't see them scale up?
Again, interesting. So I asked this question to myself many times. And I think it gets answered. We do 2 selection panels a year. One, we take in 2 cohorts a year, one in Jan, one in July. And the applications start in, or whatever, 3 months before. Just finished a round of applications. And I think those applications and the people I meet answer those questions. So why do we incubate new entrepreneurs or new social NGOs especially? One is there are newer problems emerging, like mental health. Mental health was not a problem spoken of even like 4 or 5 years back, right? Or it became the domain of at least the more affordable. But mental health is a challenge across the spectrum. Who will go provide good quality mental health to government school kids, to families, to children with who are dealing with sexual abuse, right? Or just low grades or expectation mismatch. Today, every child has similar aspirations, right? So mental health, it's a big one. And there are incredible people who come to us. In fact, we have very unique models on mental health which came up in this quarter. Water is becoming a big one.
Yeah.
So there are newer problems which come, and for that you need to incubate. The other is old problems. Now let's say agriculture. Agriculture has been in a public domain conversation for many, many years, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just amazed at the newer solutions that sometimes come up. Either it could be agri-tech solutions, it could be just improving soil quality solutions, taking urban waste and taking it back to the villages. It could be a spectrum. So you will, I think newer ideas are very, very good. Okay, let me take something which is even more easy to understand. Education, right? Learning outcomes, we've been working on teacher training, teacher curriculum, pedagogies, even that, right?
Yeah.
Today, 10 years back, would you have thought of life skills as a curriculum? Would you have thought of happiness curriculum? Would you have thought of social emotional learning?
Yeah.
Look at the number of NGOs we are supporting. People who are using sports to build life skills, to build problem solving, critical thinking. People using poetry, people using music. One of our NGOs, Manzil Mystics, uses music to get music to children for whom it's absolutely inaccessible. It's not a priority under any long list, right? But it's enabling so many musicians to come out of the woodworks, right? Besides, school becomes fun. It gets people to back to school because today you have a music class, right? Yeah. One of our entrepreneurs, Ashok, who started 12 years back, he runs a foundation called Oscar Foundation, which used actually sports football to tell children education has to be completed. So you come into school, it's after school, but you can only sign up if you will ensure school gets completed, right? But today, so while those 12,000 children are going to school, 94 of his children have now played internationally. Okay. The girls from slums of India won the Dana Cup recently in Denmark against like I don't know how many X number of teams. Kids from the community who earlier would sell a few fish, drink, get into bad habits very early on. Today they're aspiring to be professional athletes, aspiring to be nutritionists, aspiring for many, many things, right? Isn't that incredible? So if we had not, we said there's one magic bus who will take care of all sports related issues, and Ashok won't be there, and there won't be Dana Cup, which would be happening. So I just think incubation is still relevant. It is relevant for us to help people know their theory of change, see if they can make it faster. If they need to fail, they can fail faster. There's nothing wrong in failures, but at least you've tried. And people who can succeed, then they can solve the problems. And just on that one, I think I keep reflecting on this. We are 112th country on 156 countries on sustainable development goals, right? So our indices are still very, very poor. Even if there's a small NGO who's going to work in the back or beyond and make a difference to even, let's say, 100 lives. And if they can sustain even making that 100 lives for like even 5 years, I think they've moved the needle somewhere.
Okay.
So to me, it still stays relevant. I think there are challenges around it about getting them money, getting them access to resources, but we'll come to that, but still very relevant.
Okay. We have a question here. Do you believe 1,000 more enterprises at the 20 crore level will really make any difference to the ecosystem? Don't we need at least a few 2,000 crore enterprises to emerge?
Absolutely, but it's not either or. Do you think they could only have, do you think India as a country would have grown if we only had Tatas, Birlas and Marutis coming in? What about auto ancillaries? They will stay small, but they supply parts to the car manufacturing sector, right? Similarly, I mean, you have all spectrum of for-profit enterprises, so why not social enterprises? Some will go to scale. Some will set up offshoot social enterprises which feed into them, but you need all of them. So for example, one of our NGOs is now trying to be an Uber for vegetables to be sold. It's called Vistago. It's piloting currently because farmers, one of their biggest expenses of coming to market is the transportation cost. Can I be an Uber? Can I collectively get produce and come to a common point and sell it? Now it's a very small startup. It will never become an Uber. It may never become the size of Uber, but it might be sustainable, not residing so much on public money, but service a need. So I just think it's a combination of all.
Yeah. For viewers who are watching, if you have any questions that you would like me to ask Anshu Bhartia, I would request you to please drop it, leave your questions in the comment section on this video. Thank you, Anshu. We have another question for you. Can you share 1-2 examples of Unlimited India incubators that have really made a significant difference within 10 years of being set up?
Awesome. So I'm really, really proud. While I have joined Unlimited India 3 years back, we did start 12 years back. And I'm sorry, I'm going to use a paper to read numbers because I don't want to get them wrong. But let me take an example of Arpan. It works on prevention of child sexual abuse. It started in 2007, the same year we started. Today, I mean, prevention of child sexual abuse it's behavior change, it's mindset change, it's very deep. But at least if we can start creating awareness, that in itself is big, right? I don't know what scale would qualify, but to me, if you worked with 270,000 children and adults in high touch mode, where you've been part of training classes for them to understand what this is, what is good touch, what is bad touch, how to report it, I think it's a big number. They've been able to enable 9,000 disclosures in a country where we weren't coming out in front, especially in the low income society. You've been able to build the curriculum into a new NCERT curriculum under the Ayushman Bharat initiative. You've been able to build in talking about personal safety, a new of its kind. If it does get adopted in every state, 250 million children in our country will at least have a basic understanding of personal safety as a topic. Isn't that scale? And while directly they work with 270,000 people, children and adults, 1 million have been benefited by their training of professionals which are government and non-government. So in NGO, scale is not necessarily always direct work. Scale could be when people have adopted your program or you've been an enabler to adopt them and take it forward. So that's Arpan for you. There's Cuddles. Cuddles started in 2017. An equally brilliant story. So not even 10 years, 7 years into the running. 9 years, my maths is wrong. They've grown from, what does Cuddles do? So we all know cancer, right? A lot of us have family members who are survivors of cancer. Cancer in children is actually treatable a lot easier than when you're an adult. And except that the treatment is very difficult on your stomach. And now you think of an undernourished, malnutrition child from a low-income family. They move to cities to get their children treated. They have no access to food. A lot of them leave their jobs. They themselves don't have food. Cuddle started with providing nutrition to children. They actually enable a lot of the success stories of kids we would have lost who are now actually there in the system. So she grew from, Cuddles has grown from 1 hospital to 30. They've grown from 1 city to 20. They do about 180,000 councils on nutrition every year in government hospitals working with children with nutrition. They're growing year on year. They've raised 30 crores over a period of this time, and now they're doubling their outreach every year. They won the President's Award, UNDP, and actually they featured at Kaun Banega Crorepati very recently. So to me, that's an awesome story of scale. Today, Cuddles can I think look you in the eye and say, given a little more help, they can probably be there with nutrition for every child struggling with cancer across the country. I actually won't be surprised if a year or two they step out of the country and start offering it in Africa and other countries.
Yeah, thank you. For viewers watching, if you have any questions for Anshu Bhatia, please leave your questions in the comment section below. Anshu, what are the challenges that these startups face? Is it money, skills, strategy, network? What are these challenges that they face?
So there are two, right? They're not-for-profits and they're for-profits. I think all of them, very honestly, but that is true for every enterprise. I think definitely every individual in the social sector comes with passion. They have a product or a service they're very proud of, and that's the product or service they want to deliver, right? When you come to make money, you start thinking organization as well very immediately because you're going to raise money. But when I've come with a problem statement, I'm just trying to solve that problem. I'm trying to make it better. I don't think it's good enough, so I want to keep improving it, right? So I think being able to step back and get somebody who will get you your theory of change. Also diversion happens, right? I go to solve nutrition, I may be asked, get counseling help, get this help, get that help, and then it can become bigger. Can you stay focused?
Yeah.
Can you get good mentors or advisors who understand what you want to achieve, give you advice or give you options for your advice? You still have to take and pick. So I think at the initial stage, you need mentors, guides, counselors who will be in your journey to keep you focused. Then, of course, money and networks. Raising grant money while CSR money is opened up, the numbers seem very fancy. Most of us still want to support the known names, right? How do I get money mobilized to the startups? That is, I think, the biggest challenge. Can everybody start at least adopting an 80-20 rule? 80% you give to the known names, at least give 20% of your money to startups, especially HNIs. Because there is this flourishing ecosystem which is emerging with Startup India and everything on enterprises where angel investors are happy to put in the 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs. Who's putting in this 5 lakhs patiently or giving it as a grant to a social entrepreneur saying return it when you make money, right? So money and patient money or just grant money to both for-profits and not-for-profits. The third big one is again talent. I touched upon it earlier. How do I get a co-founder? How do I get somebody like a Sushant to join Unlimited India, for example? Or get somebody from the corporate sector who's done marketing? Biggest problem, I think one of the biggest challenges that these NGOs suffer, and I think our NGOs suffer a lot, including us maybe at some point, was marketing. I have a great product, I have a great solution. It is going to stay small, but I need to be able to communicate it well. Where am I going to get an opportunity to present to such a large crowd which will listen to me? How will I say the story well? Right? I get into the how very quickly, but my impact is not what I'm sharing. Like today, till now, I haven't told you I work with 250 entrepreneurs and that one in 5 gone to scale, right? I'm still, very passionate about what I do and how I do it rather than what its impact is. How do I communicate it effectively? Marketing is, I think, one of the biggest challenges because you need to market not to donors and funders, but you also need to market it to the beneficiaries, to other stakeholders, to team members who will join you. How do they believe you're there to last, right? So I think let's put all of them together, but money, resources, and marketing. I think I'm more and more believing marketing is an important need.
Okay. So I have another question for you. How are these challenges different for non-profit, social enterprises, and mainstream business startups?
So I think I touched a little briefly.
I mean, non-profit as well as for-profit social enterprises as well as business enterprises. How are they different?
Yeah. Okay. Let's take money, right?
Okay.
Money is available now with the amount of angel networks coming up, Startup India giving money, DST setting up incubators, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one is, if you're technology based, there is a lot more money.
Mm-hmm.
If you're for-profit technology based, there's a lot more money, right?
Mm-hmm.
In enterprises, people come in with expectations of return. You are focused, they are going to see your trajectory in terms of business.
Mm-hmm.
People get that.
Mm-hmm.
So there is money there. Because you will be able to offer ESOPs, you also get talent,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're from a good pedigree, then it's easier to get that money.
Mm-hmm.
But even startups will continue to be haunted by
Mm-hmm.
production capacities, by talent, right? Now you layer on it social enterprises, which are for profit, right? But they're going to be, okay, let's take an example to make it real, right? I'm making footwear, which is machine made. A lot of the cutting happens. The basic last mile may happen by hand, but now you take a desi hangover, a new startup of ours, which is working with Kolhapuri artisans. They want to make handmade Kolhapuri shoes, right? The same shoes are now available by many, many different outfits, including cheaper substitutes which are machine made, right? Would you pay almost a very similar looking product? Would you pay twice because one is handmade and the other and organic dyes versus something which is machine made, right? Now, yes, you will say I'm a conscious consumer. I might, right? But how many conscious consumers do we have? So where will I get volume? Where will I get scale, right? So social enterprises struggle with scale because if their true DNA is giving back, keeping their products low priced, not as attractive as the for-profit market models, or even equally attractive, so I'm saying this wrong, but the packaging maybe. Can I invest the same money a paper boat invested when I am a Bhuya, which is in Himalayas? Can I invest the same money on marketing as paper boats did? Right? Our products are very similar. Paper boats makes juices, they make jams, right? And very high quality, truly non-preservative based products, right?
Yeah.
But how do I get them to the market? Can I put, who will invest the 40 crores in me because they know I can't go to scale? My product will still stay small. Nature's Basket has come in as a venue for people like that, but it's still very small. So the challenge will become, how do I scale? How do I get patient capital which understands that my returns may truly not be the same, may take longer, but they're of value, right? Now you come to not-for-profits. That's another level because you have no means of sustaining yourself. You have to constantly be dependent on grants. However good your work is, you have to raise money consistently. A lot of our laws are annual. Then they're very, nobody's investing in capacity. Okay, when I'm an enterprise, I get revenue, right? Or I get money, I get a $1 million investment. Where will I put that money? As I want to use it best, right? R&D, capacity building, hiring the right team, setting up a sales office, right? Now I'm an NGO. I want to scale. When I get that same $1 million, it will come with riders. It will come, you will only do it on a program, how many children will you do, you can't exceed your admin cost by more than 10%. How do I invest in capacity? How do I invest in pilots? How do I invest in R&D? How do I invest even in impact which I want to report into you? So NGOs just get completely boxed in by the diktats of what that money comes with. Social enterprises get boxed with capital which is limited, not understood, not risky enough, and enterprises have the other challenges.
We have another question from Thambi Kona. What are the major issues that NGOs should concentrate to address? Secondly, how can we mobilize volunteers from all levels, village, panchayat, mandal, district and state level?
Awesome. So the first one, I'm not sure. I would need a bit more clarity. When you say what problems NGOs should solve, I mean, if that is your theory of change, the problem you want to solve. But if you're talking at an organization level, I think you should get a marketing collateral. You should build a network to be able to raise money if that's the challenge. If you can clarify that a bit more, I can address it a little more in detail. In terms of mobilizing volunteers, I think it's a great question, and I think it is something NGOs should focus on. Because so again, it comes down to marketing. Can you tell what your problem is, what you're trying to solve, what's your solution? Can you get people who understand what you're trying to do, why you're doing it, and how you will do it? How will it be fair and equitable? You will be able to if you can get people from the community, not only do your problems get solved, they actually buy into it, and it's sustainable even when you exit, right? So I think if you're able to demonstrate that you're here to stay, your product or service that you're bringing to the table is useful, even if you start with 2 volunteers. And usually, some of the NGOs which have done really well is when they've got the panchayat to buy into it, the sarpanch vets it, they start giving their time. One of our entrepreneurs, Surinder Yadav, working on Self-Reliant India, he actually went, and one of their big ahas was that they got the panchayat sarpanch to put their child into school.
Yeah. Tanvi's question was more about what causes should NGOs focus on to really solve. What are the major issues that need addressing is actually the question.
Wow. Honestly, I don't know. It's a very difficult one. I have personal pet peeves. But today, I think anything you touch is a problem and you can solve it. It could be Swachh Bharat. It rides with the government. Water is a global crisis. Gender is a global crisis. Just personal safety is a global crisis. So you know what? It's a very wide landscape. We can talk offline. But it should be a cause which resonates with you. It is a purpose which comes close to your heart. When I made my switch from the corporate sector to the social sector, my temptation was to take the first job I got, which was with children, which I've always said I loved. But then somebody wise counseled me, go meet different people, see the solutions out there in the market, and see which one resonates. And actually at that point of time, livelihoods resonated most with me. I thought if people have money in the pocket, they will ask for better education, better health, and it worked for me. Then I moved to agriculture because the farmer plight bothered me a lot within the livelihood spectrum, right? So I think it would be useful if you want, go to our website. There are 250 solutions out there, people who worked on different problem statements. See what resonates with you. Talk to people. Do whatever you do, but take it something which truly resonates, because it's a tough journey. It will take a lot of grit and determination to stay the course. You have to be very, very passionate to make it work. So happy to even talk offline if that will help.
Yeah. And also the second part of the question, how can you mobilize volunteers from all levels?
Yeah, so I was like that, I said, once you have your theory of change, talk about it well, document it well, should be crisp, clean, clear, should be able to understood in 2 minutes or 1 minute, because that's the attention span. Start getting even 1 or 2 people, people will pull people. And depending on the geography you work in, it'll lead to your volunteers. Your networks will lead to volunteers. So Make a Difference is an NGO based in Bangalore. It is largely volunteer driven, right? Then there are other NGOs which use volunteers in small and big ways. I think it'll depend on your theory of change, because for example, there's a person in Juhu, in Bombay, who cleaned up the beaches, right? He started this whole movement by doing it himself, and then people started kept joining him. Today, it's not even an organization, but there are lots of volunteers who come together to clean the different beaches, right? So I think it's just your theory of change and being able to state it well and demonstrate it live.
Yeah. So Ujjwal has a question. He's asking, does Unlimited India have plans to be an accelerator? He finds that there are many social enterprises these days, have access to incubation support, but there is very little growth capital or growth support, and hence the question. Yeah.
And great question, Ujjwal. Thanks. So one is, I think it's very interesting. Recently, one of our ex-employees, who's now with a larger social impact incubator, came back and said, one of the amazing things about Unlimited India is the profile of people who apply to us. I think people apply to us because we are not taking an equity in them. A lot of social enterprises, till they don't have a robust enough model, don't want to start looking at equity, because they want to be able to understand where they're going, build a model which will not be a distressed equity investment, but a thought through strategic equity investment, right? So one is they come to us. So I think we would still continue doing those, and then becoming hence a pipeline to impact investors and impact incubators. So we do fall in that interesting niche, which is still underserved. The second is accelerator. We do have a ready to scale program, which works with organizations which are 3 to 5 years. It's a program we are investing in now. We've had that program for the last 7 years, but I think we are deepening it, we are getting in the right expertise, and we are building out that program. So that's definitely on the cards. You should see a lot more action and ability for us to share success stories in the next even 12 months.
Yeah. So one last question I have for you.
Mm-hmm.
If a wannabe angel had, let's say rupees 10 lakhs to invest or donate for a social startup, plus some time and lots of networks, what would you recommend to them?
I would say find your purpose. In fact, I think one of the earlier Facebook Live people, Ratish, had said that, find your purpose. Find your purpose and say, what do you want to do? Are you just a giver? You want to give money and monitor it? Do you want to see it grow, create a pool which can get reinvested, then you go to a social enterprise? But I would still encourage you to give it as a grant. Let them use it unrestricted and pay back if and when, right? Or maybe in small bits. But I think it's very important to know, do you want to see the aha yourself? Then maybe, giving money to 10 surgeries where you'll be able to see an immediate impact. Given where we are and the incubator we are, I would love you to be able to find an NGO which is doing an incredible job. Go visit their field. Don't just go to one school if they show you. Don't visit one patient if that's what they take you. See 10 patients. Go to patients who are not coming onto their program. You'll get to understand the context. Give money to a startup. Give money to a social NGO, of course, because social startups still have some revenue models. Give money to an NGO. Invest in them. Give them your networks so that they can grow. And because now you will be a big fish in a small pond. So you will be able to be part of a journey which is going to create immense impact. I think Ashok would have been, who I earlier talked about, who uses football to do education. I think Ashok would have always been a success. But did we play a small journey, and do we continue to play a small journey? Yes. Every time I get him one funder, I go back home feeling much nicer, knowing that I am part of Ashok's sustenance of creating the most amazing impact that I see, both on Ashok as an individual and the organization and the kids he works with. So I would say start somewhere. Don't keep that 10 lakhs to you though. Don't overthink it, spend it now.
Yeah. That was some nice session that we had for our viewers. Thank you, Anshu. Thank you for taking the time and doing this masterclass for us. I hope there will be many more angels who will come up after this masterclass session, live session, and hope you'll all start investing in non-profits in this country and start making a difference.
If any of you, sorry, just last, if you want to, really, I am a corporate crossover. I have been investing last 10 years in this space. If you want to have offline conversations, I'm not on Facebook, but you can reach me through Unlimited India's Facebook page. I'll be very happy to have offline conversations. But yeah, start giving small, but start giving. Be an angel.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And before we sign off, I would like to tell you about Living My Promise. Once again, Living My Promise is an initiative for ordinary Indians with a net worth of above 1 crore who can pledge to donate 50% of their net wealth either in their lifetime or in their wills towards philanthropic causes. So far, we have 41 Indians who have signed up. I would request you to go to www.livingmypromise.org website to check out their profiles and some of the fabulous, amazing work that these people are doing. We also conduct Facebook live sessions every Saturday. We bring experts like Anshu Bhartia and others, and we discuss various topics on philanthropy. So please keep track of Living My Promise Facebook page and do check back every Saturday around 11 a.m. or 11:30 a.m. For some amazing sessions like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.